So to start this video off, I'm going to be pulling out the dictionary and looking up some word definitions just so we are all on the same page. Starting with the word peaceful. Peaceful, devoid of violence or force. Hopefully we can all agree on that definition for the word peaceful and it's not super contested. Okay, the next word or words I suppose are non-compliance. Failure or refusal to comply with something such as a rule or regulation. A state of not being in compliance. Okay, now let's see if we can find a definition for all those words together. Funnily enough, new words emerge when you do that called civil disobedience. The definition for that is as follows: refusal to obey governmental demands or commands, especially as a nonviolent and usually collective means of forcing concessions from the government. So, with those definitions out of the way, we can now all be on the same framework. So definitions are great, but examples I find are where the real substance is. So let's look at some historical examples of peaceful noncompliance, starting with the ones you might know. The Freedom Riders would be a good example of peaceful noncompliance, as it fits perfectly with the definitions laid out above. Buying alcohol or even selling alcohol during Prohibition is another example of peaceful noncompliance. Now, with those two examples set, it's time to give some more controversial opinions. What Philip Ludi and Jay Stark did was a valid form of peaceful noncompliance, which you might be asking who are Ludi and Jay Stark, which is a long story, but essentially Ludi was a pro-gun activist who made a homemade firearm as well as rim materials on how to build one. Now, while Ludi did some other stuff that it could and be safely said were not peaceful noncompliance, those two actions listed above most certainly were. As let's go back to the definition of civil disobedience for a second. Refusal to obey governmental demands or commands, especially as a nonviolent and usually collective means of forcing concessions from the government. Well, he definitely refused to obey governmental demands or commands. He did so in a nonviolent manner as well. He acted alone, but being in a group is not required for something to be civil disobedience. It's just usually something more commonly found with civil disobedience. He tried to force concessions from the government but did not succeed, but you don't have to succeed for something to be civil disobedience. Jay Stark is in the same vein as Ludi. Made a homemade farm design and made one himself. That is another example of civil disobedience. Now, you can personally disagree with these two and what they did. However, what you really need to admit to yourself is this: peaceful noncompliance equals a valid form of protest, even if you personally disagree with it. You could argue that a valid form of protest should have someone ending up being arrested at the end of it, which is kind of a poor argument that relies upon an appeal to the law fallacy, which would be kind of contradictory, as some people refuse to pay income taxes and are completely peaceful about it to the point they even end up going to prison in some cases, which in Canada's case is ironic, as if you put someone in prison, then they end up paying no taxes at all unless they get a job in prison where their wages are garnered for taxes, even though they wouldn't reach that income tax bracket, but that's a side point. Now I could go on and keep listing example after example of cases where it would be civil disobedience. However, that would make this video longer than it needs to be. So I'm going to just say the title of this video one more time in closing. Peaceful noncompliance equals a valid form of protest, even if you personally disagree with it.